Hello, everyone. I am Professor Marcos Santos, and I coordinate the activities of the Operational Research House. And today, we are going to learn about SAPEVO-M-NC method and how to use the website where we can calculate the results from the method, even if we don't know so much math or so much operational research. Hello, Mr. Maêda. How's it going?
Hi, Professor. I'm very fine. Thank you. And you?
Pretty good. Thanks for asking. Today, my guest is the mechanical engineer, Sérgio Mitihiro do Nascimento, Maêda. Graduated in mechanical engineer from the Fluminense Federal University in 2012, and master's degree in production engineer at the Fluminense Federal University too. He worked in the area of project and maintenance management in companies such as RAIZEN, SENAI and Tormene Americana do Brasil. He is intermediate officer of the Brazilian Navy with specialization mechanically and post-graduation in ship control and electricity systems. He is currently served at the Center for Analysis of Naval Systems, where he works in the area of operational research. In academia, he has published several papers in the field of operational research, especially in the field of multi-criteria decision support. Thanks so much for accepting my invitation to talk about SAPEVO-M-NC method and the software where we can calculate the results from the method. Well, make yourself at home. Let's get started.
Thank you, Professor Marcos. First of all, thank you for this opportunity. As the professor said, I am a master's student in production engineering at the Federal Fluminense University, and now I will present the multi-criteria decision support method SAPEVO-M-NC. That means simple aggregation of preference expressed by ordinal vectors, non-compensatory multi-decision makers. Let's move on. These are the topics that I will cover, consisting of contextualization, important concepts, the SAPEVO-M-NC method, a numerical example that where we will explore more about its axiomatic and applications, showing some papers and the reference used to develop this method. Contextualization. Decision-making is a cognitive process associated with selecting a course of an action from a set of alternatives. Every process of this nature produces a final choice, commonly called a solution. Thomas Saat clarifies, we are all decision makers. Everything we do, conscious or not, is the result of a decision-making process involving a variety of information that must be evaluated to verify if they meet the decision maker's objectives. The multi-criteria decision-making or multi-criteria decision aid are techniques for advising the decision-making agent for making decisions on complex problems, evaluating, ordering, selecting, or classifying alternatives through different points of view and within predefined criteria. According to the nature of the set of the alternatives, the multi-criteria decision method can be subdivided in two approaches: multi-attribute decision-making and multi-objective decision-making. The multi-object decision-making seeks to optimize a set of objective functions associated with the continuous decision space composed of a theoretically infinite number of alternatives. The multi-attribute decision-making seeks to select alternatives in a discrete decision space under multiple criteria, presenting a limited number of alternatives. In the literature, the multi-criteria decision aid methods are classified in different ways. The most relevant classifications subdivide them into two streams: single criteria aggregation methods of synthesis, compensatory, American school, and auto-ranking non-compensatory methods from European school. French or European school method explore the auto-ranking relationships between the alternatives that can be strong difference, a weak preference, a situation of indifference, and incompatibility. The ordering of the alternatives or parts of them are taken to an order of preference that can be total or partial. Well, the SAPEVO-M-NC method. This method is considered an original non-compensatory method which addresses the problematic of ordering and within the possibility of evaluation by multiple decision makers or a single one. In the method, the performance evaluation of the alternatives is carried out directly with no need to perform parity comparisons between the alternatives to obtain the modeling of preference between them, resulting in a reduction of the cognitive effort by the decision makers. That this part consists in a very important point of this method. So the benefits of this method is parity comparisons only to access the importance of the criteria, single preference modeling for all criteria, direct attribution of the performance of the alternatives, and the reduction of the decision makers' cognitive effort. Well, the method starts with the evaluation of the relative importance between the criteria. This table presents the relationship of the relative importance between them. Let D and key be a set of key decision makers that express their opinion on the relative importance of the criteria. This preference gives rise to the MDM key preference matrix. The relationship between the two scales of the table allows the transformation of this matrix into a vector column. After generating the vector, the elements are normalizing according to this formula, where we take the element that we want to normalize minus the minimum element of this vector and divide it by the maximum element of this vector minus the minimum element. The second step consisted on the original rating of the performance of the alternatives, where the decision maker or the decision makers make the original classification of the performance that is done directly. This part doesn't need to make it a parity comparisons between the alternatives to make this classification. In this step, each decision maker assigns the rating related to the performance of the alternatives in each criterion, which are related to the rating range. After all decision makers perform their evaluations, the arithmetic mean of these evaluations of the classification range of the performance of the alternatives in each criterion is obtained. For each criterion, a parity comparison is made between the alternatives to verify the relative distance between the mean values of the classification range. These values allow us to identify in the preference modeling, that is a single one, the weight fraction of the criterion obtained by an alternative A in relation to the alternative B. In this figure, we can see three different regions. The first one in white or blank is a region of indifference, followed by our region that where we have a weak preference, and the last one where we have a strict preference or a strong preference. And in this table, we have the relationships related to these regions. Well, after this, we start with the calculation of the relative dominance obtained by the weighted sum of the criteria weights with the corresponding fraction verified in the preference modeling. After this, we go to the conduct assessments that is divided in a partial evaluation and a global one. The partial evaluation consists on the calculation of the absolute dominance and the outranking rate. The difference between the relative dominance provides information on the absolute dominance between the alternatives. This allows to identify the existing relationships between the alternatives. Dividing the dominance, the absolute dominance, by the sum of the weights, the outranking rate is obtained. It's a very simple, where the positive values indicate that the alternative A dominates the alternative B. The global evaluation consists on the calculation of the performance rates. The method makes it possible to carry out an analysis of the total performance of each alternative, evaluating the performance rates obtained by each one. This information allows to carry out a sensitivity analysis of the performance of the alternatives. Finally, to order the alternatives, a similar Copland approach is used, verifying the difference between the number of victors minus the defeats. When two or more alternatives have the same result, the performance rate can be used to difference them, providing greater transparency in the process. Now, let's verify this axiomatic using a numerical example. This numerical example consists on 4 alternatives that are evaluated in light of 4 criteria. Oh, let's suppose that the father is going to help the son to choose his next car. So we have all the alternatives and the criteria used in this analysis. Here we can see the structure of this problem. And the method starts with the evaluation of the relative importance of the criteria. Here we have the matrix where the first decision maker will evaluate the importance of the criteria, and the main diagonal is every element is equally important because we are comparing criteria with itself. We can see in the evaluation of the first decision maker when he is comparing the first criteria with the second criterion was considered equally important. The first criteria with the third criteria much more important, and the relation of the first criteria with the last one were considered more important. The second criteria with the third criteria was considered more important, and the second criteria was considered more important than the last one. And finally, the third criteria was considered equally important with the criteria 4. Now we have this this verbal classification replaced by the scale, numerical scale, and now under the main diagonal we replaces by the symmetric numbers of the classification. Okay, now to obtain the weights, we sum all the values of this row and we obtain the score. We normalize this score using that formula previously presented. And note that we have a null weight. It doesn't make sense. So we replace it then by 1% of the subsequent minor value of this vector. Here we have the judgments of the second decision maker, and we do the same process to obtain the weights of the criteria after the judgment of the second decision maker. Well, in this step, to obtain the final weights of the criteria, we need to aggregate this preference, just sum them. Then we have the final weights of all criteria. The second step of the math consists on the evaluation of the alternatives in light of each criteria. Here we have the decision matrix composed by 2 quantitative criteria and 2 qualitative criteria. That is personal information. Let's start with the judgments of the first decision maker. Well, for the first decision maker, he just needs to evaluate the performance of each alternative in each criteria directly. So we can see his judgment of the first alternative in each criteria, where on the first criteria was classified as very good. The first alternative was classified as good on the second criteria, as medium on the third criteria, and as a bad on the last criteria. The evaluations of the second alternative that was considered good on the first and second criteria, excellent on the third, and medium on the last one. And all the classifications of the performance of the alternatives. We replace them with the classification range and start with the second decision maker judgments. We have here all the judgments done by the second decision maker. That consists on the same process done by the first decision maker, and the classification range of these judgments. Now we have to take the arithmetic mean of the classification range of the performance of the alternatives. So we just sum and divide by the number of the decision makers. Here we have this arithmetic mean. And with this arithmetic mean will be used to obtain the fraction of the weights of each alternative in each criteria. So to this, we need to observe the relative distance between the classification range of each alternative. Let's take as example the first and the second alternative. The first alternative was classified with 1.5 on the classification range, while the second alternative was classified on the classification range number 3. So we take the difference between them. Note that we are passed from a better range to a worse range. We are comparing a better range, okay, that is the alternative 1, to a worse classification of the alternative 2 on the same criteria. So that's why the value is positive. The same occurs when we are comparing the first alternative with the third. And note, when we are comparing the alternative 2 with the alternative A, now we are observing a difference between a worse range with a better range. So the product is a negative value, okay? Now we have all the values completed with the relative distance. And to obtain the fraction of the criteria, we use the modeling of preference indicated on this graph and in this table. Well, but the modeling only admits values positive. So we'll take off all the negative values of this matrix. Okay. The next step is observe in the values placed on the indifference region that is placed between the values 0 and 1 inclusive. So we have all these values placed in this region, and if you and in the model of preference, we can see this region, the fraction obtained by these alternatives is 0. So we replace them by 0. Let's move to the second region. That is our weak preference. In this, we can use this formula to obtain the fraction of the criteria. This region is placed between the values 1 and 3, okay? Inclusive 3. So we use this formula, and we have here all the calculations associated and the fractions of weight obtained. And the last analysis consists on the region of strong preference that consists on values higher than 3. So we have 2 elements here that we will replace by 1 because it's a totally fraction of the criteria weight. The next step consists on multiplying the fraction obtained by the weight of the corresponding criteria. Now we have here all the products by the first column with the first criteria, and the second one to the second criteria, for example, and all the weights obtained by the comparison between the alternatives. Okay, to obtain the relative dominance, we just need to sum the values of each row. So let's start with the first, that we are analyzing the relation between the first alternative with the alternative 2.
Maêda,
The second
observation.
Okay.
In numbers in Portuguese, we use comma, and in English we use point. So,
okay. So
in this case,
my fault.
No problem. Because everybody is watching. So, for example, 0.25 is equal 0.25. So just a little, okay, observation.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay. And we have the second relative dominance between the alternative 1 and the alternative 3. And all the relative dominance is obtained by sum each row. It's a very simple process. If you analyzing, we don't use here complex calculations. It's a very simple, and it's the object of this method to be simple. Now, for the calculation of the absolute dominance and the route rank rate, we just need to compare the relative dominance obtained by the first alternative over the second one, observing the difference of the relative dominance obtained by the second one over the first. Okay, let's see how can we do this. On the first example, we have the first alternative, the dominance relative on the first alternative over the second one. And to obtain the absolute dominance, we just take the difference between the relative dominance that the second one had over the first. The second line, we can observe that we are analyzing the dominance, the relative dominance between the alternative A1 and A3. A1 and A4. And we have here all the absolute dominance associated with these comparisons. Note some positive values and negative values. It will be important when we're analyzing the auto-rank rate. To obtain the auto-rank rate, it's just necessary to divide this value of the absolute dominance by the sum of the final weights obtained. So we have here all the calculations, and you can see the negative values. This negative value, what it means? It means that the first alternative of the pair were dominated by the second one. Okay, and on the first negative value, we can see the comparison between the alternative 2 and the alternative 1. It's a negative value of the auto-rank rate. So it means that the alternative 2 was dominated by the alternative 1. Here we have the alternative 3 and alternative 1. Means that the alternative 3 was dominated by the alternative 1. And with this information, we can verify the number of victors and defeats of each alternative. On the first, we are analyzing just the number of victors of the alternative 1. So we can see 3 victors, okay, and 0 defeats. On the second alternative, it had 2 victors and 1 defeat. On the third, 1 victor and 2 defeats. And the last one, 0 victors and 3 defeats. Now we can order the alternatives. The first one was C4 Cactus. The second one, Chico 5X. Third, Chip Renegade. And the last one, Honda HRV. Now, Professor, we use the SAPEVO-M-NC web that is under development, but I think that will be a very good opportunity to show the capability of this method and this application, this computational application can be very good for the decision makers using this new method, new multiple criteria method.
Exactly. Very interesting, because sometimes the truth is, I think everybody hates math.
Yeah,
So
I agree.
So this is a good opportunity to everybody use the method, because the
Okay.
software is very easy, very simple to use.
Yes, yes.
You
Totally agree.
You need to fill in the data set. You need to fill in the data, and there is a set of equations that they run automatically. We don't need to know nothing about math and not about operational research.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's so hard to work with operational research.
It's
So
very good to save time.
So I think it is important when the scientists develop a software, a tool to facilitate the work with this method. For example, for instance, I am operational research scientist. You are operational research scientist. But for example, a doctor, a nurse, a lawyer, so how they can use the method? So yeah. I think this is important to develop a map, develop a software that everybody can use.
Yes,
so,
yes. It was very, sorry.
So tell us about the
very
software.
Important what you said, because the method can be used by everyone. And,
exactly.
Yeah, and the people doesn't need to know every step of this method just to have a result for this problem.
Look, you need to know about the idea, about the general concept.
Yes.
To solve this problem, I can use SAPEVO-M-NC to solve this kind of problem. But I don't need to know every equations, every relationship between variables and so on. So, explain step by step how can I use the software. And for everyone, I will put the link, the link of the software. I will put this link below in description of this video. So explain step by step how can I use the software.
Okay, Professor. Well, to use this method is very simple, because we just need to know, to insert the criteria associated, the alternatives, and the number of the decision makers. So I will show step by step and clarify this. In this first place, we just need to put all the alternatives that will that you use in this problem. So our alternative was A1, C4, sorry, H, which is the second one. That was Chigo 5x. The third and therefore on the HRV. Now we'll describe all the criteria to 1, 2, 3, and 4, and just put the number of the decision makers that is in on the problem. After this, we just need to click on generate structuring. Now we have our structuring, and download the spreadsheet. In this spreadsheet, we'll add all the judgments that we just done on the previous example. So you can see on this column the criteria evaluation, and we can see the evaluation of the criteria 1 over the criteria 2, the criteria 1 over the criteria 3, 1 over the 4, and all corporations. It consists, Professor, on that matrix that we done comparing each criterion.
Yeah.
And here we just put the classification of the importance of the criteria. For example, criteria C1 and criteria C2 were considered equally important. So when we come back and see the table here,
okay,
we can see the number associated is 0. Okay, so and just need to put 0. Alternative C1, criteria C1 and the criteria C3, for example, were considered, the first criteria was considered much more important than the criteria C3. So we will put the number 2. Okay, and we do this for all comparisons. Okay, and here we have all the alternatives, and in each space we'll put here the evaluation of the performance of each alternative in each criteria. So to optimize, I have here this spreadsheet that I filled. Okay. I filled it with all the comparisons that we done on the numerical example. And we can see on the first element, the comparison between the first criteria and the second was equally important. The first criteria with the third was considered much more important. Here we have the third criteria, design over the brand reputation, was considered equally important too. And the evaluation of the performance of the alternatives. Okay, you just need to put the values directly of this performance. Where on the first, let's see the first alternative. On the first criteria was considered excellent. Let's come back to here, just to clarify. Here, okay, remember this matrix. So we have all the performance of the alternatives, and we just do this on this spreadsheet.
But look, to use the method, the person need to know about the scale. Come back to the slide.
Okay, I'll come back. let's
It's
do steps by-
important to know about the scale.
Okay.
And
Okay. Let's come back and do step by step. First of all, we'll make the comparisons of between the criteria. Okay.
okay.
Let's see on the presentation that table that presents the
7 point scale.
yeah 7-point scales that is equally important. The relative scale is 0, less important is -1, much less important when we are comparing criteria with another. When it's considered much less important, we attribute the value -2. And when the first criteria is considered absolutely less important than the second one, we attribute the value -3. Okay, so let's see here what we have.
The software is very easy to use, but it doesn't do magic. You have to do what are you doing?
Yes. You need to put your judgments here and just this. But
Your
you need
judgment
to
from this scale.
yes.
According this scale.
Yes. You need to know where you take the relation, or you just here we just need to use two tables. Okay, for the criteria we use this. Okay, that is related to relationship of the
Between criteria.
between the criteria, and the second one that I will show again relative to the performance of the alternative. So let's start with this. When you are comparing the first criteria, acquisition cost, with the second criteria, maintenance cost, for the first decision maker, that's important to observe too, that we have two, I forgot the name, two table. And the first sheet is reference for the first decision maker, and the second one to the second decision maker. Okay, so we are here and now just done all the evaluated by the first decision maker. So for the first decision maker, acquisition cost over the main cost was considered equally important. Acquisition cost over the design was considered much more important. Okay, let's see the table here. Much more important. Okay, so associate the number 2. Acquisition cost over the brand reputation was considered more important here. Maintenance cost over design was considered more important, and over brand reputation more important too, and design over brand reputation were considered equally important. Now the first decision maker will insert the perform of the alternatives. Now we use the second table here. Okay, now here we can see the original classification of the performance of the alternatives in each criterion and the classification range. So come back. Let's see the first alternative. The first alternative on the first criteria was considered excellent. Okay. On the criteria, maintenance cost was considered good. On the criteria, design was considered medium. Okay. Number 4. And on the last criteria was considered bad. Okay. the performance of this alternative on this last criteria was considered bad. The second criteria, or the second alternative on the first criteria was considered good, the performance. Its performance on the second criteria was considered good too. On the third criteria, design was considered excellent. And in the last criteria was considered medium. Okay. And do it for all the alternatives. On the second sheet, we have all the judgments of the second decision maker that was done the same process, attributing the value here on the performance of the criteria, okay, and here the performance of the alternatives in each criteria. I think that is more clear right now. Do you agree, Professor?
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on. Now, we say table, okay. And we just need, we come back to the page and go to implementation. Insert this archive, okay. Now we have all the structure performing and just clicking in resolve. A magic, we have here all the performance text of each alternative, the weight of criteria. We have to graph express this performance of alternative and the criteria weights. It's good to help to the decision maker or the analyst to understand, to better understand the problem. Here you can see that the acquisition cost had a weight much more, was considered much more important than the others. And we have on this second sheet the outrank analysis, where we can see all the relationships of outrank between the alternatives. Okay, it's the same. Yeah. Remember, when we have the negative values, it means that the first alternative was dominated by the second one. Here, we can see this. The second alternative was dominated by the first one. Okay. Let's take this row of the first alternative. We can see that all the values are positive. So this alternative dominated all the others. And let's take the last alternative, alternative 4. We can see all the values are negative. So it means that this alternative was dominated by the others, okay? And we have a graph expressing this relationship. On the first, refer to the first alternative analysis. We can see in blue all the alternatives that were dominated by the first one. Here on the second, and the level, it's important to note too, Professor, the level of this column represents the intensity of
How
this.
important? How important?
Yes. how it was this auto-ranking? It was very strong or weak, okay?
I got it.
And the second alternative, we can see that it was dominated by the first one, so it's in red, and the thing means the intensity of this dominance, and on the second and third, the relation of the alternatives that the second dominated. The alternative 3 was dominated by 2 alternatives.
Okay.
Just dominated the last one. And on the last graph, it's totally red. That means this alternative was dominated by all of the sets.
Other, yeah.
Yeah. So the user can download all this this data just clicking in,
Data set, you can download this data set.
Yeah,
in PDF.
download the result table.
In PDF or spreadsheet?
Spreadsheet too.
Yeah.
So we can see here all the analysis.
Good.
The text perform of the alternatives and the weights and the relations of dominance here. Okay. So it's very, very easy to use.
Very easy.
Yeah.
Intuitive, very simple
Yeah.
to use.
Yeah.
So
now I will show you some
the papers, some papers, published
papers.
papers.
Yeah, some papers of this method that we was published, that were published.
I think this is the first paper about the method, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
The first. I think it is the first paper, published paper about the method.
Yeah. And we have all this method can be used on a large nature of problems. Can be used on military problems or economic problems, on a health problems.
Industrial.
Yes, a large range of problems. This method can be used because it's an original, professor. So it's not necessary to take a quantitative, exactly quantitative data. So the user can use can use his experience too. So this method can be used in a large range of problems.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we have two different situations that we don't have numerical data. Sometimes we don't have the data. So we don't have. How much, for instance, I want to buy a car. Okay. How much, we have 10 cars. Okay. How much costs each car? I don't know. But I know that Rolls-Royce is much more expensive than a Honda, for instance. You know, so I have a judgment. I have inside of my mind, my brain. I don't have the number, but I have the knowledge.
Yes.
It's okay. The number exists, but I don't know. But I have my judgment. Okay. And we have another kind of problems, mainly strategic problems. But for instance, We have two power plants, for instance, nuclear power plant, and two different projects, and I am the specialist. So I have to think about the environment impact. How can I measure environment impact? I don't know how.
Yeah.
There is no scale for that. How can I measure? The strategic return to the country about the project E or project B. For example, in a military problem, we have two projects developed of a new missile and a nuclear submarine. What is more important, the strategic return to the country? So I don't have numbers, but I have my judgment. Oh, yeah. Okay, submarine is much more important than a new missile, because a missile I can buy, okay. So I think we have these two kinds of problems that we can use this method. When the data set, the data exists, but I don't have them. And another problem when we are working with strategic problems. Normally, we don't have a scale for the criteria and so on. So, and it's important to show the papers, because when we write a thesis, when we write a paper, we need the reference. So, yeah. You are not crazy. This method exists, and yeah. This method was published in scientific papers. So everyone yeah. can use. Calm down. Everyone can use it. It's okay. It's a published method. So everyone can use in theses or papers and any kind of scientific work. So go ahead.
And it's important to point to that this page that is in development is totally free. Okay, yeah, totally free. So you can use it.
Everybody can use.
Yeah, everybody can use. Yeah, so it's totally free, and the objective is to help the society as the entire society with the operational research.
We, like I always say, we are Brazilian scientists. So so Brazil pay our salary, pay our wage. So we have this. We have to return to our society this knowledge, because we are earning money to study. We are earn money to develop new methods, to learning about new method. So I think we have this. We have to help the society. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So these are the references used in this study.
Oh my God, the reference. Oh, dude, the reference is you. You are the reference. Maêda,
Yeah.
you are the reference about the method.
Yeah. The method was developed by me and the group. So,
So
you find my surname on the end.
so
And I leave
well,
here my contacts and the QR code of the link of the operational research house, that where you can find a lot of videos, very important videos about operational research, and it's a very interest. And one more time, it's totally free. Does that it, Professor?
okay. I saw that the software is very useful and very easy to use. And like I said, I will put the website below this video. I will put the website, and everybody can use the software that you showed.
Thank you.
And
Professor.
I think it is important to tools like that, like you showed, because sometimes it's so hard to work with mathematical models.
Yeah.
So this platform allows that everyone can use the method. You only need fill in the values. You need to know about the scale and about your judgment, but you need only fill in the values, and the software calculate the result quickly.
Yes.
And in addition, I realized that you don't need to download any software. It already runs directly in the browser. You don't need download and install the new software in your computer. It is a online software. It's wonderful. I hate install any software in my computer. So thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you for this opportunity.
My hats off for you. It was an honor for us to have you here today.
Thank you, Professor.
And my friends, thanks so much for watching this video. If you like it, give us your thumbs up and subscribe on your YouTube channel. And like Professor Maêda said, we have more than 400 classes on YouTube channel, Operational Research House. We have Kruskal algorithm, simulation, and Q theory, graph theory, multi-criteria, linear programming, and many other classes that you can imagine. So if you join this video again, give us your thumbs up, and thank you very much for watching this video. And bye-bye. See you later.
See you later. Bye.